Hello. In this video, I'm going to walk through the Get, Load, and Save buttons down here in the storage area. They are incredibly important and easy to overlook. So I have a moderately interesting demo here. Let me switch to impedance, which is not that common, but makes a good example. I have two tweeters that are D27TGs. I have an old NOS from VIFA, and then I have a new one made by Peerless. I thought I would compare the two impedances. So let's start. I have the new one connected to the computer in the sort of correct way. There's a 10 ohm resistor in series with the speaker, and here is the impedance chart. Let's take a look at this. All right, I'm gonna save some of this stuff. All right, so we have a peak here at about 800 hertz or so, 710, I guess, and it has a Q, and here's the phase chart. Now, things that you want to do are describe the test. So let's say this is the new one. So this is the Peerless T20. Let's do this. Let's call this D27TG. This is Peerless versus LIFA. And then the description of this is the Peerless driver that I'm currently testing. Okay, so I have some information about the test, and you'll notice that the heading has now changed here, the title, and there's the heading right there. And so the first thing I'm going to do is save the data so I can take a look at it later. I go down here and I click Save, and let's give it a name. We'll call it QA Peerless. Okay, and that's it. Now, when I did that save, it saved all of this information as well. All right, now I'm going to walk over and redo this test with the other tweeter. So 10 seconds to go disconnect one tweeter and connect another tweeter. And this is the older VIFA tweeter that I had lying around that I would use for a pair of speakers potentially. Okay, so it's connected. And now let's go ahead and get the impedance chart for that. Now that looks very different, but what I'd like to do is actually compare them bit by bit. I mean, has this moved? Is this different? So what we can do here is a couple of things. We can load the old one. First, let me just take a look at the test info. Notice that it hasn't changed because we just did another test. So I'm going to say this is the VIFA driver. And then I'm going to save it just to be, we'll call it QA VIFA. All right, now let me do a get, and I'm going to get the Peerless chart. And now we show up as an overlay, and we can immediately see the difference between the two. Here's the VIFA. In fact, we can turn off the phase temporarily. And here, just looking at the impedance charts, they are way different. And in fact, the old VIFA driver doesn't look that good. Interestingly, they both have the resonance right here, although it is much lighter in the older one. Now, also, this says, if we look at the legend, note it says D27TG. That's not that useful. So I can go to the edit right here, and let's change this. This is the Peerless drive, so we'll call this PRLS, which is kind of short, but makes it pretty easy to see. And now this will say Peerless And this is the one I'm currently running, which is the VIFA. So we have an easy way to compare these. We can get our old data here. When I do a get, by the way, you can actually get more than one file at once if you want. And if you're not wanting to look at this, we can just click here and it'll remove itself from that. Now, there is one third one, which is load. So watch what happens when I do a load. Let me change my test a little bit here. Okay. And now let's load our historical peerless test. Now, when I do that, the data shows up here. Let's get rid of mini plots. And let's turn the phase back on. And note there is nothing shown down here because we're not examining the image. But what has happened is all of the settings have been turned back to the test we did. So if you want to compare two tests, you can not only compare the data, but by doing a load, you can actually look at all of the test conditions and make sure that they're done the same in both tests. And that's the end of my summary.